how we do things now. You know, Councilman Bettinger said back, when other people were doing that they would measure setbacks. Can you show me the policy that that we have currently in place that shows what the inspector does and doesn't look for?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Rainville.
Councilmember Rickard, I would believe, based on what happened here, we don't have a policy in
You
place.
just said we did.
No.
You said yes, you did. Play back the tape. You said based on the policy that we have now.
I don't remember saying based on policy, but
You
what
did.
I'm saying is based on the building permit that he pulled, showing the footprint of that structure, he moved it.
And I don't dispute that.
And to clarify,
Yeah.
what I heard her indicate, she may have said policy, the practice is, obviously, right now, they don't measure the setbacks.
Since when, though? According to Councilman Bettinger, we
Well-
used to. So again, that's on us. That's on us for
And-
not following through with our building officials on what we expect them to do.
But I will agree, we've had numerous situations come up before the council in the last number of years where the buildings and additions and new buildings aren't sited properly, and whether the setback or the literally over property lines. We've had a number of them where we've had to resolve that by neighbors trading property because the buildings are across property lines. So it has happened. I mean, it's, whether it was common practice, whether it was sometimes practiced. Obviously, in this case, there was no indication, and I don't know that the homeowner intentionally hid it. He didn't bring it to the forefront that, oh, by the way, I had an approved site plan, and I modified it greatly, and I plopped this thing down on top of some power lines that are underground, too. He's fortunate when he was drilling his footings, he didn't hit the power lines. But he knew that he did, and his first time before the planning and zoning, he admitted, I did it. I didn't tell anybody, and we went ahead, and when they came out and approved the footings, we just went. It was getting cold, and we wanted to get this thing done. But it was intentional, and it wasn't intentionally brought up when the footings came out, say, by the way, we changed the location of the building as well.
Mr. Mayor.
Planner Stockton.
Well, again, keep in mind, part of the reason there were a lot of previous mistakes is that we didn't require the site planning and the surveying. I don't always require a survey for an accessory building. I always require a survey for a home or the principal structure. But, it was very clear in telling Mr. Clemmer how to measure and whatnot. But one other thing that, may have played into this too is that I believe Andy was the one that reviewed the plans. And then, one of his people went out to do the footing inspection. So if it's in your head and you're familiar with the site by looking at the plans, it's a little different too. Nonetheless, there's a responsibility there, but still, and just to be, get everything out in the open. I've seen city councils go both way on this. I mean, you're just gonna have to vote on it. I have seen city councils decide to grant a variance based on an error that was made, not necessarily on the property owner's part, but in this case, I think, on the city's part, if you want to call it that. I mean, I don't necessarily agree 100% with calling it an error, but I understand what you're saying.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Rainville.
Ms. Stockman, do I remember you saying the reason you didn't require a survey is based on the initial location where it was to be installed, that he was way farther into the property lines, or far enough away from the property lines that there wasn't an issue of being close to them?
Exactly. If you were closer to the side lot line and I had a question, if they can't show me their corner irons, then I will say, we need to, if you're closer than, say, 30 feet, then I'll have them get those verified.
Okay.
But he was inward from both sides based on the original site plan. And then that's why I was so careful at indicating on the original plan that, it's a little bit dark, but I had shown on the original plan, the distance from the proposed building to the center of the street, and explained how the setback was measured.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Rainville.
And also based on the memo from Ms. Stockman, twice we were out there, November 17th and November 22nd, for footing inspections. And neither time did the homeowner tell us that the structure was moved.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rickard.
and again, we should be catching it. If we're out there twice. But again, I understand, you know, what we're saying and whatnot, but again, regardless, moving forward or whatnot, we do need to make our expectations known that, especially in something like that, regardless if it's an outbuilding or a house or whatnot, I believe our inspectors should be checking to make sure setbacks and locations are met. You know, again, I don't think anybody's cleaning this at all. So that's why I would propose some type of compromise if we can. Because there was an error on our part, in my opinion, and I don't think we're cleaning it. So if there's a satisfactory compromise that works for everybody, that's what I would propose.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Ryan.
question for Planner Stockman. Is that document on the far right provided to the building inspector?
Yes, Mr. Clemmer sat down with me to prepare this site plan when he submitted the building permit application.
So that gets included in, let's just call it a packet of stuff?
Right, Andy won't review the building permit until he has a site plan.
Okay.
And some people just don't know how to do it, you know what I mean? They just feel like overwhelmed by it, so sometimes it's easier just to talk it through with them, you know?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Rickard.
To piggyback the question on that, whoever goes and inspects, would they have a copy of that site plan, or no?
I'm not sure. I don't know how that works with Andy's.
Okay, well, because obviously, I'm assuming, if I would have this site plan, and then when I went out there and I inspected the footings, I could quickly see things weren't kosher.
Well, I believe there's a file, and maybe Ellen can back me up, I'm not sure if you know, but there's files at the city offices, and I know Brandt or one of the other guys comes in, and looks. I don't know if he physically takes it to the site.
They usually have things on the devices, they do everything electronically.
Oh, Andy saves it all
They'll take a piece of
electronically too,
paper
so
out.
they're looking at their iPads, yeah.
Yeah, because I guess if I were to go out there, I would definitely question this and the location where it was prior to approving.
Well, and what's funny too is you can see that one of the corners of the proposed building, this corner, you can't see, well, it would be like the southwest corner of the red square, is fairly close to that setback. And I actually think he did pull a tape from what I recall Andy saying from that one corner, but not all the corners, so.
All right, do we need any other discussion at this point? All right, we'll vote on Wednesday. Planner Stockton.
Just one final comment on the Clemmer issue, I'm not sure which way it'll end up on Tuesday, or not Tuesday, but our meeting Wednesday this next week. Just be sure to be very specific and specify your reasons why, one way or the other, for that approval or denial. It just helps to create the proper findings for the record.
All right. Very specific. And exact. Meanwhile, lot split.
Mr. Mayor.
Planner Stockton.
So it's approximately 40 acres the Greenwalds would like to split into 3 parcels. If you well, maybe some of you were at the planning and zoning discussions. So the 40-acre piece on the left is the piece they're splitting now. Their family owns another 40-acre piece to the east. So the intent is to keep that 19 acres on the current parcel for re-subdivision later with the other 40 acres. So there was some discussion at planning and zoning relative to the lot buildability not being shown on the 19-acre piece. What I was telling the planning commission was, you know, there were 3 ways to handle that fact. You could, A, ask them to complete the buildability. You could deed restrict the parcel so a building permit couldn't be issued. Or you can waive it under the minor subdivision regulations. And my personal feeling is it's not that big of a worry if they, you know, it will become a separate parcel of record. They could sell it if they chose to or decided not to develop it with the adjacent 40. But even in that scenario, we would never let a building permit go forward without having soil borings done and knowing that it could support a primary and a secondary system. So that was probably the main discussion at planning and zoning. Other than that, it's fairly straightforward. There is, if you noticed in the report, the request for an easement to access the barn that will remain on the 19-acre piece, which is parcel C on the east side. And that would just remain, somehow we would have the attorney draft it so that easement would go away when the barn went away or when that property was sold to someone else. And that's just strictly for access reasons. The subdivision has not been reviewed by Anoka County yet, so they may have to deed some additional right-of-way. At any rate, their intent is to sell the 2 10-acre pieces at the present time.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bettinger.
why wasn't this reviewed by Anoka County already before it went this far? Because if the county reviews it now and it says, no, we want the driveways here and here, and then, now you gotta change property lines and redo the plat for the minor subdivision.
Oh, I see. I don't,
Typically, it's done in conjunction before it gets to the planning and zoning for their decision.
yeah, I agree. It probably should have been done already. And I'm not sure. I guess Shane reviewed the plan, you know, prior to the P and Z meeting, and he put that in there as a requirement. But, you know, maybe one of us should have recommended that they do that, so maybe I dropped the ball on that. Because I don't think the Greenwalds have ever split, you know, or developed any land before, so it probably is Shane or I that should have had that done. But they still have to get the wetlands checked and do some other things, so, we'll, submit that as soon as possible.
Other comments?
Mr. Mayor.
Ellen tells us with the packet for Wednesday, we'll have the pictures with the packet as well. Councilmember Bryan.
Planner Stockman, I'm just trying to remember from the planning and zoning what that issue exactly was, and is it, I mean, we can go either way. I know there was a lot of discussion on should it go one way or another?
Oh, the lot buildability issue?
Yes.
Well, generally, when you're creating a new lot, you want to know if it's a buildable lot or not. In this case, you know, the Greenwalds and their surveyor felt that because it was being subdivided later, why should we, you know, waste money on the soil borings now, not knowing where to do that. So, that's why they didn't do them.
So,
I do think it's incumbent on the property owner to make that decision. We've had this come up before where people saying, I really don't want to develop it. I don't need to prove buildability because I'm just going to use it to pasture my cows. And if I ever do want to build, then you have to prove the buildability at that point. But I think that the planning and zoning, the people that voted against it, wanted to lock it up saying, no, you can't build until you prove the buildability. Either do it now or deed restrict it. But our codes are going to require buildability before somebody can build on it anyway. So if they want to sell it off and it's not buildable and somebody wants to go out and hunt on it, they can do that. But they're not going to be able to build on it if there's not a buildable site with septic and backup. So the argument back was our codes already, our zoning ordinance already required that. So putting them through that right now isn't necessary if they're not building. If they sell it later, then the buyers would have to know
they
that.
have to do it then.
And I think that's what the two commissioners were concerned with is, you know, the buyers would have to know that, you know, this is a buildable lot. And so they don't sell 19 acres as presumed buildable, but that's something that if you're buying the acreage, you should be aware of. They're just saying make it as mistake-proof as possible, restrict it now.
Mr. Mayor?
Planner Stockman.
Just to clarify too, under the minor subdivision, which is the 3 lots or less, you're allowed to waive that requirement versus if it were a plat, they would have to go back and show that as being buildable. And typically because they are, you know, smaller parcels that probably won't be split again or.
In the plat, do the only buildable lots count as in your average?
Yeah, I guess I've not seen anyone plat. You can't plat it if it's not buildable under our lot buildability.
If it's not buildable, you just have to take that land and add it to another.
Exactly, so then it ends up
Portion.
averaging out, right? Or if it's platted as an outlot, you can do it that way and add it to a subdivision or land later that might abut it.
Any other questions on the Greenwald property? Seeing and hearing none, we'll move on. And then back to that real quickly though, so who's gonna deal with the county? Is somebody gonna tell the Greenwalds they need to?
I can, yeah, either call them or just submit it directly to the county for their review.
And then the minor subdivisions approved, subject to following conditions. Have any of those been met yet?
They have to have the wetlands reviewed by Casey, the wetland specialist. No, they haven't done the deeds or anything else since planning and zoning. They're out of town right now, which is why they're not here.
But obviously, we want to make sure if we move forward with this, that those conditions are identified and we're locked up until they're met.
Absolutely. And Shane always does look at it again at the end, so.
Temporary habitation for beauty property.
So, Mr. Mayor,
Madam Stockman.
the house is under construction. There is a building permit that's been issued for this. As was indicated in the letter, they just want to get the kids in there and started on the bus and everything. So there's no switching around when they, officially move into the home. I guess everything's fairly straightforward here. They'd place the home on the pavement by the existing pole barn. And I looked up the fees and the escrow that we used for the Thorkelsons that were on Zeolite a couple years ago, and that's what I inserted in number 1 on the first page for the escrow, security deposit.
All right, any questions on that one? And the last page, the neighbors were notified and were supported.
Yeah, the neighbors don't have any issue with it.
Standing hearing no questions, we'll move on. Code enforcement.
Well, if it's okay, we'll just take the Willing property issue, which was addressed in the memo. So some of the surrounding area property owners had a petition or a complaint about the weed problem on the Willing property. So Mr. Willing moved a house in 2016. Went through that building permit process and is kind of just taking his time with, making site improvements and doing things around the property. He did come in to speak with the city engineer and I this spring. He indicated he was going to be doing some grading and taking some of the earth and using it to build up a driveway area. And then he put a culvert in the ditch behind the home. So the issue is that it was a farm field, and he didn't or hasn't yet planted any grasses or any wildflowers or anything to that extent. He's just kind of let it go natural. So our ordinance is somewhat confusing, I would agree. In a rural community like ours, we do have, quite a few people that like to keep at least a portion of their property natural. And I think natural's okay as long as the people are controlling noxious weeds, which is required by state statute. And They can either mow 2 or 3 times a year to control those noxious weeds. That prevents any flowering and then reseeding. There's a very specific list of noxious weeds that have to be controlled. And they can spot spray with like a Roundup type product. Or, you know, just pull them out and burn them or something also. So the question is, you know, I think it's, I guess in my opinion, unreasonable to enforce this on a 10-acre parcel. We can't expect everyone to mow 10 acres into a, you know, sod yard type situation. But I do agree that we need to either clarify this or remove it from the ordinance. If we do allow a natural prairie, if you want to call it that, or natural areas, as long as people are controlling the noxious weeds and in one way or another, it's, you know, there's a fine line between a weed and a flower, because a lot of wildflowers are considered weeds. Even goldenrod, for instance, that a lot of people dislike, is actually a wildflower, and you know, that's a good example. But we've had some suggestions that, you know, maybe we should require that everybody have a portion of their front yard be sodded or mowed, but then that's difficult. You know, on a wooded lot, we have a lot of skinny little driveways that go through the woods and you can't even see the house, you know, so it's really, I think requiring a sodded mowed area would be hard. I mean, most people, majority of people have an area immediately around their house where they like to keep the, you know, tall grass down. So I guess mostly just want to hear your thoughts and what you feel. I do have the photos up here. So again, this is a 10-acre piece. It went through a lot line reconfiguration a couple years ago as well. And some photos from the property on the south side. So what you're seeing, the kind of the dirt or gravel in the forefront is his driveway. And then the rest of it's pretty much just natural. And there's some tall stuff in the foreground there, along the property line. And even in here, I can see the, like aspen or the softwoods already starting to grow up naturally. This is up closer to the house. And that's burdock there along the property line, which is a noxious weed. It's poisonous to horses, so that really shouldn't be there. And then this is a view across Mr. Willing's property over to the Dubniquets pole barn. And the pond is kind of between, in that area between the driveway and the pole barn. I guess that's it.
What's the gravel area there to the top right?
Well, he took some of the, some dirt or whatever from part of his yard, and he had to build up the driveway somewhat before he brought gravel in. I don't think he's quite done. You know, and he's been doing a lot of it himself, and, you know, just pecking away at things. All of our really ordinance requires is that, you know, there's cover there growing so that we don't have erosion issues. And he did get approval for the grading part of this, so it's just a question about whether this is, you find it offensive or not, or what the issues are. And we have, Tiffany Foy is the neighbor to the south, and you're Mr. the Dubna case?
Correct.
Okay. And they live on the north corner there with the pole barn.
So, 2 of the 6 residents who signed a complaint,
Yep, but
or are you 3 of them?
All 6 residents signed it.
Where to?
The other 4 out of town.
So would you like to say anything to enlighten us of your complaint?
Please.
So
Please step up to the podium, introduce yourself and give your address, please.
Okay. Tiffany Foy, 20339 Foss Street Northwest. Dublin. So there was a picture that had stated that the hardwoods are growing. There's also in the picture, I'm not stepping on this property, but it is Canadian thistle, which is noxious. That stuff right in there.
oh, is that what you were
Yeah. so I
showing?
was trying
Okay.
It's all over back there. So what I know is he has 3 weeds, and he probably has more, but from what I see, because it's starting to come onto my property, is burdock, cockleburr, and this Canadian thistle. And for me, I mean, it's hard for me because I've lived there for 17 plus years, and I go out and spend 3 hours a week with it, because I don't want this crap in my pastures, because I have horses. And I have friends that have come to my house recently that haven't been to my house for years, and they drive past his place, and it looks like a trailer park. And he doesn't seem to care. And he stated that he was gonna plant grass seed. He did in his front yard. I think that was last year, but then they just let it go. So, my understanding with the ordinance that I had read was that we have to keep it a certain height and can't allow these weeds, but he just seems to be able to do that. And the other neighbor, which I actually forgot about, that lives next, Todd, he got cited for his grass up front last year. A
Todd,
letter or,
Todd Spike.
where's he? Which road is he on?
he's,
2960 203rd Avenue Northwest. Was cited for grass invasion. Was told he had to mow the grass.
I don't believe so.
You can't find where he came to council, but we also have the ordinance. But we also have a letter.
and he went out and bought a mower and he's keeping it mowed now. But I just think that Willing has let this go out of control. I mean, he could just mow it. It doesn't have to be this manicured lawn, whether it looks like a green manicured lawn, we live in the country, but he could mow it to control the weeds. And he's not doing that. He spends so much time on his stupid driveway and no time on anything else. And he took a lot of soil from his farmland to build up that driveway. A lot. From the back, from the front, around the house. So, I mean, I know we all have natural areas, but if you're gonna make it a natural area, then maybe plant it like River Energy did, for all the bees and have beautiful flowers, not this stuff. That's pretty much what I have to say.
Anything additional?
Rob Dugan. I'm kind of curious why we're here.
Address, please.
20475 Boss Street. So Tiffany referred to Todd Spike, it didn't come in front of council, I could find it, looked back all of last year, couldn't find anywhere in council. Yet he was ordered to mow the grass because it was too long. I know exactly who wrote the, and who complained about it, as a matter of fact. It was the,
Doug and Carol Serdal.
because they sold their property and the house was horrible to look at. And he had to mow his lawn, he was ordered to and did. Because it was literally knee high. I get an ordinance request in February that I can't find ever came in front of council, that I'm in violation of a confusing law that says I can't put personal property within 3 feet of the property line, but I can put a fence on my property line, that's okay. When I approach and say, what can I do about it? I'm given a form that I'm supposed to pay $600 to change an ordinance. Yet tonight, we're here because a neighbor that started in 2016, lives on a property, that was farmland that was planted from east to west, that flows into, if you look, it's a little piece that cuts out. You see where the pond is actually open, that wetland cuts across. It all pitches into that my wetland, my pond. My concern was once that wasn't farmland, there's no more roads to stop water. So I met with previous council people and Liz and was told, same as Tiffany, that the plan was to plant that as grass. That would then stop the erosion and it would deter the water from running. 2018, not a spectacle, grass. If you go back a couple of photos. Nope.
Here?
Nope. That one.
Nope, there was one other, but
That's his house. If you look above the tractor, where's the grass?
there's a better one that would show it.
Well, here's what I don't understand. This memo, this letter is sent and dated July 23rd to Liz from Shane Nelson, says I did notice that there is non-turf established. Per city code, he's required to establish turf 14 days. But she just stated there's no ordinance for turf. Is Shane wrong or she wrong? I mean, this has been a circle we've gone round and round with for years. And enough's enough. I don't know if she doesn't like me, if she doesn't like what, I don't know what it is. But it just keeps getting pushed on. She stated that he's gonna move a little bit of dirt. An email I have right here, dated 6/10. Mr. William had permission to move some dirt around, fill in some low spots in the driveway, bring in gravel and make it wider. He also had permission to put in a culvert. He raised his driveway 3.5 feet. That's not a little low spot. And his driveway isn't short. I asked you to come out today, you to come out today, and you to come out today. That driveway is not short. To raise that 3.5 feet to move a little bit of dirt, he had to dig out half his property, which changed all the grade and all the elevations. There's a culvert on his driveway that was not approved per an email I have from Liz. So now it dumps more water. These things are being done, and it's almost like, it's blind, don't want to see it, so we just do it. And when we complain, we end up here. So how do we end up here when other complaints are actually being handled and we're getting cited, neighbors getting cited, but for some reason, we have to now change the ordinance. But the ordinance clearly states 8 inches tall against the rule, grass or weeds. That's all I got. Thanks.
Mr. Mayor?
Leonard Stockman.
The city engineer did review Luke Willing's site, not only when he brought the home in, but in the last, at least twice in the last 2 years. So Mr. Willing did come in and speak with Shane Nelson and I this spring, explained exactly, had a drawing of his property, explained exactly what he wanted to do, that he was gonna take some of the dirt off his property, raise the driveway up. Shane said that was fine, there's an existing culvert under the driveway that allows the water to go back and forth that way, so he wasn't blocking any flow. I remember when the home went in, Mr. Dubnick did speak with the city engineer at that time and had concerns about the, farmland going away. And he was told by Shane Nelson that actually there's more runoff from the farm property than there is from just natural cover or the sodded area. So that was not a concern. Shane reviewed all the drainage, as he always does. For a lot like this that's not platted, there's always a individual lot review by the city engineer to ensure that, everything's accurate. The lowest floor elevation, which way he's directing water, does it meet the 100-year flood elevations and those kind of things. So, you know, I think we've gone the right track this whole way. I think possibly, you know, with this turf thing, there's a couple different ordinance requirements that come into play. Yes, Mr. Willing is and was aware that, he has to get this reseeded, and that was his plan, was to seed it. You can't expect, you know, it's not gonna look like you sodded it, and, you know, if you're seeding it, it takes a while, but it, you know, it is not irrigated, so it's gonna be a little slower. So, you know, we could, you know, talk to him about it. I haven't been on site, in the last, you know, few weeks to see what the progress is. We spoke by phone. He said that he had been controlling the weeds. You know, obviously with this picture, he's not getting all of them. So that would be something that we could address under our administrative citation ordinance, because again, it is state statute that he has to control those noxious weeds. Other than that, you know, right now, we can't require him to mow it if he's controlling those noxious weeds, so.
Liz, why wouldn't we be able to, if the 8 inches is the requirement, weeds or grass, why would we require that he mow?
Well,
And obviously, that's not spot maintained.
right, right.
Those are pretty big.
Well, but are you gonna enforce all the lots then? I mean, there's hundreds of properties and now then that have
But
native,
but with the idea that he was supposed to establish turf, there's no turf anywhere on the acreage.
well, it doesn't necessarily have to be bluegrass, you know what I mean?
No, in many places out here, you simply mow the weeds
Right,
and
right,
call it a yard. I mean,
correct.
Without
all right.
irrigation,
Okay,
that is common out here, but it keeps it at a reasonable height. You know, with a little tending, you can make it look kind of grassy.
mhm,
But that certainly isn't there. And short of pulling them or poisoning them, you know, generally when you see something, and I understand they pop up quick,
mhm,
and that's why you gotta pull them and get rid of them.
right,
But I would think that it's certainly in front of the house towards the road where it affects the neighbors, we would expect it to be mowed. I mean, if he wants to keep more natural around the house and can take the critters that come with that, that's slightly different, but as long as the noxious weeds are being taken care of. But I do think whether it's establishing turf, whether it's keeping the weeds mowed to look like a lawn, or actually putting in lawn, you know, I think neighbors would probably be happy if you would at least mow it to look like a shorter weed patch, lawn patch than. And because if it is going to seed, I can see that'd be a problem the neighbors have to then keep up with.
well, there's a lot of other areas though, I mean, we're gonna have to be specific. Cause it's my feeling that you can't just go and enforce what's in this ordinance right now, because otherwise you're gonna have to go through the whole city and treat everyone the same way.
Well, but again, historically, we've been complaint driven. We have 6
Yeah.
complainers here. And
True.
And if somebody is letting the noxious weeds get out of hand on their property and it's affecting, especially if they're poisonous weeds, affecting horse pasture and anything else,
Mhm.
yeah, you're gonna get a complaint and I think we deal with them on a case by case. Yeah, there's a lot of land when people start getting 5 acres out here. What used to be farmed and what's farmed now isn't always maintained that way.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Rainville.
To Planner Stockman, so the complainants have talked about a location that was cited last year. How did we cite that? I
We
mean,
didn't. Yeah, it wasn't cited from the city, from me, because it would have been on our code enforcement list, and it would have, I don't recall anything. I mean, I don't have any weed enforcement at all. I'm gonna look in my files. What was his address again? First Bike, you said? What road is he on, 203rd?
Yeah.
Oh,
No,
No,
Todd Spike.
Spike.
Todd Spike.
Todd
Todd
is
Spike.
230.
Do you know what his street is?
yeah, I don't.
You had it 203rd?
It's 203rd.
Can I approach the?
Yep, right.
Okay, so I realize, yeah, you can't police everybody, and there are other properties that have weeds, but apparently whoever lives next to them is okay with it. But this is 6 people complaining. And so, for me, it's been more added work, because like I said, I don't like the weeds, I don't want my horses eating them, they drift over because they seed, he lets things seed, but to your point, yeah, you can't police everybody, but when you have a complaint, I think we have to approach it then, because it is in their ordinance. But if these other people that have the same thing going on and their neighbors don't care, well, then I guess they don't care. So that's what that's what I see.
Well, like, Mr. Mayor,
Planner Stockman.
I think I agree it needs to be done because of the noxious weeds. If he's not controlling those, then he should have to mow that. Whether, if A, is it 8 inches, and B, is it the whole entire property? I guess maybe we need to have him come in and suggest a plan for how he's gonna manage it. In the interim, he can certainly mow it, but a long-term solution, unless he's gonna mow it. If you mow it 3 times a year, then would that satisfy the neighbors if he just mowed it even once a month?
Then they wouldn't come to see. So, eventually, you keep mowing things, and eventually you just get natural grasses.
Okay.
And that's my experience. Or he can spend, 4 hours like I do, weekly, because I'm like, want everything nice.
But every weekend, just trying to keep our yard maintained because his weeds constantly make it into my yard. Every Saturday, every Sunday, I'm letting his full weeds.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bettinger.
the problem with the ordinance is though, yeah, we can say it's complaint driven, but in the eyes of the law, if we go to court against him, you gotta treat everybody the same. And that's the way it is. I know we do a lot of things that's complaint driven, but if it goes to court and you don't treat everybody the same, you're gonna lose. It's gotta be, and then when this ordinance was done, I wasn't on the council then, but I remember the 8 inches coming up and I said, who's gonna decide who mows what and how much? I have an 8-acre lot, so if somebody complains to me, I'm gonna have to mow my whole 8 acres? I don't think so. Something does need to be done with the ordinance to define it better. So many feet around your structures but not the whole 8 acres, or the whole 10 acres, or 20 acres, whatever it is. Noxious weeds, yes, they should be gotten rid of, I agree.
Mr. Mayor,
Member Rickard?
I agree with what Councilman Bettinger said, but so if we look at the ordinance today, though, as it's written today, I have 2 issues. One, obviously, if there's, who's been out, I wouldn't be able to go out there and tell you what are the noxious weeds and what aren't. So who goes out there and does it? And, well, yeah, I understand that, but is spot spraying gonna be enough? Probably not.
No, you'd never be able to
Yeah,
keep up
so,
on it.
and apparently that's what he's been doing, so it's not working, so something's gotta be addressed. Number 3, I actually, by request, drove by there this afternoon, and I do have a concern with the amount of bare ground that is out there, because the way all the elevation is, it's all going to the north. And I was surprised on that north side of the driveway, how much bare ground there is there, how much bare ground is in the front. And with the way it is right, nothing's gonna grow there. And until anything grows there, it's just gonna keep going that way.
Well, pardon me, Mr. Mayor?
Planner Stockman.
On the day we had Corey's party, which was what, 2 Fridays ago? 2 or 3 weeks?
July
20th? I asked Shane to go out and look at Willing property to be sure, because we had gotten the complaint and I wanted to be sure that what Luke did was what Shane thought he was supposed to do, and he concurred, and he did not have a problem. He said, based on that square footage, you have, you have cover on the downhill side toward the wetland, on the side toward the other ditch, there's, if you have 50 feet or so of, grasses, that catches your runoff, your silt, so it doesn't infill. I don't know, so Shane was.
Was the driveway raised 3 feet as stated here?
I was surprised how
In
high it is.
Yeah, in the gully, there was a kind of a lower spot that he really raised it up.
And most of that came out of his land?
It all came out.
He took, yeah, he took it out to build it up there.
That's not typically a good driveway anyway.
No, that, right.
Well, and with that, you do change the entire runoff of that entire side
Well,
of the
which is
property.
why I had Shane look at it, because I'm not the grading specialist. So I wanted to be sure he was okay with that.
So Shane knew that he was gonna take and build it up 3 feet?
Yep,
Wow.
I don't know why you would.
but there, he said that it's not affecting that drainage, there's a culvert there, so.
Mr. Mayor?
Can't be any topsoil left.
I know.
Councilmember Ricker.
And I just go back to, in other instances where, people come in to get their site plan reviewed, and we, if it's around a wetland area or whatnot, we require X amount of silt fence, and we do specifically require that they get some type of vegetation growing because
Yep,
of the runoff, and again, I'm no expert by any means, but, just the way the grade is and how much bare ground there is there, I would assume there's gonna be, a decent amount of runoff going toward the north.
okay. Well, I don't know, we can send a notice, but then we have to give them 2 weeks to get the work done. So, and then if he doesn't do it though, then we can cite him. But I think we need to be specific about what you want him to do. One thing that Otsego does, which, they have a lot of farmland still kind of interspersed, they require properties to mow in 10 feet on all sides if they're abutting, like houses, developed properties. And that keeps the weeds from spreading that way. That's one thing we could do. I don't know, there's, we could talk about ordinance changes, but I do think we have to be specific and allowing natural areas.
Yeah, I think your comment on coming up with a plan, maintaining that border would be certainly part of that plan.
Okay,
Addressing the noxious weeds would have to be part of that, because that's it, that starts blowing in the wind, that's gonna get beyond these properties. So I would think that that's gotta be part of it.
That should be part of it now, that's part of it now, though.
That's part of it now, but there's gotta be part of the citation or part of the addressing it with him, saying noxious weeds have to go. You have to start mowing until you come up with a plan that's acceptable. Knock down what you got and come up with a plan that's acceptable to minimize any impact on neighboring properties. But either way, the state requires, we require the noxious weeds be addressed. And obviously, from the few photos we've got here, the spot spraying hasn't been effective. Cut, pull, something. Actually, that pulls pretty easy, but there's probably a lot more than that picture shows. Mr. Dubnick.
So these photos also I'm showing, this is 4 acres of his 10. There's 6 more behind this that you're not seeing, that you can't even walk through, that are this high. And I want to retouch, you brought up, and I wasn't sure if you were referring to Mr. Spike's picture or what was in her statement, or I don't know what you call that she submitted. The city had similar complaints of property which was brought to city council's attention, no action was taken. So last year we did this. I didn't complain, somebody did.
No,
What was
yeah.
done from that?
No, it was when we had talked previously.
What was done?
We had brought it up, I brought it up to the council, and I don't remember if it was a year ago or 2 years ago. And we just briefly touched on it. We did briefly talk about the weed issue and whether, you know, this, I said at the time that this was intended more to enforce, you know, weeds in what had been a sodded or, you know, bluegrass yard that somebody has let go, for instance, you
I
know.
don't mean to offend Ms. Stockman, but I didn't think you're a lawyer and took the law, you enforce it.
No, I am
But
part
the
of it.
city attorney enforces it, interprets it. I feel like, and we feel like you're picking and choosing which ones where to enforce, which ones to drop. You said that, I can't remember his name, Shane, knew about the driveway. Your email to me says minor elevation changes and sinkholes. Or excuse me, outside correctly, make sure I quote it right. It had nothing to do with bringing in 3 feet of dirt. So how Shane was bringing in 3 feet of dirt when you didn't? I'm kind of figuring this, it doesn't make any sense.
Well, we were in the same room, Mr. Dubnick, and we talked, you know, I heard what he heard and vice versa.
Then why did you say something different?
Well, whether I call it minor or major, I guess I don't know. What do you consider minor then?
Some potholes is one thing, 3 feet elevation change and digging out 10 feet around his house, 30 feet wide, that's a big change.
But that's why I brought in the engineer, because I'm not the grading specialist.
This is before I started.
But our mining laws and regulations also say how much dirt you can move.
Yep, there is a square.
We figured he's moved about 50 yards of dirt, based upon the bucket loads and what he's done and what he's got.
Has he moved more in the last 3 weeks? Because as I said,
So he regraded all to make it look like he didn't dig down 15 feet or 10 feet around his entire property. He graded it all out to make the slope look a little gentler. Every day he's out there with this tractor, just changing the grade, changing the grade, changing the grade.
well, we can get him on that, you know, it's not covered.
Yeah, but you told me 2 years ago he was planting grass.
Well,
Where's the grass?
again, we're dealing with right now. Right
As
now,
far as
what
the
we're
blowing
gonna
in the things, what did you see in my driveway?
Your pole mill, it's weed covered.
There's no driveway anymore, and I drag it once a week. I can't keep it down. You talked about mowing 10 feet around the property. We were ordered not to touch this property through you.
Excuse
You were
me.
ordered not to touch this property through you.
No, he'd have to mow his property.
No, we can't mow, we have to stay away from his property. We were mowing to the property line and got complained against, because it was so big. It just feels like
That's
he gets
why-
with murder, we do nothing. You talk about the culvert, I've got the site plan, there's no culvert on the site plan. Where'd it come from? There's no culvert on the site plan you sent me. It's there now. But you're talking about a building official not following along.
The engineer knew about the culvert.
Well, it's on the site plan.
And knew that he had to have one under the driveway there, and that he was
No, no,
putting
no,
one
no, no, no.
in the,
Dated May 30th, 2016. Rob, here's a site plan that was submitted, reviewed by the city, shows proposal. The city has not issued a building permit, is waiting for additional work. Regarding septic and drain, the city engineer Shane has deemed he does not need a culvert. Well, there's one there.
no, not, that was referring to at the ditch area there.
Well, the culvert isn't in the ditch, back in his property.
That's what I mean. He
Don't you
didn't,
have to-
he
You
didn't,
put your own culvert in, when you feel free, move water around?
Mr. Dubnick, what I'm saying is, he did not need a culvert in the ditch next to Boss Street. That was in 2016, when he first got the house approved.
But there's no culvert even for that approved on his property.
Is there a culvert out on Boss Street?
No, it's about 20 feet in. It dumps more water onto the other side. Because it was flooding her property now. But the site plan that we asked for review has no culvert anywhere on the property. None. I'll pass it on.
That does get to be a headache when
There's no culvert.
we've got that in a few other locations in town.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bettinger.
as far as the grading and the drainage, everything, it sounds like the city engineers looked at it, so I don't, at this point, have any problem with that. I think we need to work on the things we can work on. We have noxious weeds, and he should get the areas that are bare, get them seeded. And he could work on mowing some of his property around his house, whatever that is. I don't, the ordinance doesn't really define it, I don't even know if that's enforceable, but if he wants to get along with his neighbors, that would be something that he should do. But the things that he should do for sure is, the noxious weeds and seed the bare areas, get it seeded so there's no erosion.
That's why.
So I just wanted to clarify, so, no, Liz didn't say anything to me that I couldn't be on his property. I actually got a letter from his attorney telling me in the letter not to mow his weeds. is his weeds last year were 8 to 9 feet tall, and they were dripping over on my property. So I took the weed whipper and cut them off where they were leaning over here. And then I get a letter from his attorney. So in him and I, we did that whole property split.
Adjustment.
That all was fine, but then it's really just kind of turned into a nightmare. But I mean, my lawyer was like, I gotta give you this letter. And he's like, he's complaining that you're mowing his weeds. And I'm like, it's burdock, it's stuff that isn't supposed to be there. He should be happy, really. I mean, but that's, it wasn't her, it was an attorney.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Ricker.
Like how Councilman Bettinger said, obviously, there are, in my opinion, as the way the ordinance is written right now, there are two things we can definitely enforce. And that's the weeds and the erosion. And moving forward, I do think we need to, like we talked, look at the ordinance and see how or if we want to change that to be more specific. But like I said, as of right now, by ordinance, by law, what we can enforce are the two things.
Well, actually, the amount of soil moved is also enforceable.
Correct, if we can prove that.
Well, and that's,
I got before and after photos I gave you.
what was that, Mr.?
I have before and after photos we have to have.
Oh, yeah. Well, we can see what was disturbed, right now.
So, I mean, that's the third thing, because we do have ordinances, how much land you can disturb.
Mr. Mayor?
Planner Stockman.
Sorry, Ms. Rainville. Do you have any interest in involving the engineer again? Do you want to let that ride? As I said, he was out there 3 weeks ago. And just, have me talk to him about the other things, the weeds and the seeding.
I think one of the, based on other complaints we've had in other neighborhoods that as they've developed where water flow is changed, like a culvert, if the culvert was necessary to move the water to the wetlands behind the Dupniquet's property, as long as that volume is not changed. But I think of some of the properties south of me where that's been a major issue, where people are funneling volumes of water into their neighbor's property. And Shane has gone out there and looked at it and says, yeah, well, that part's not right, because that wasn't part of the site plan when we came in, and you are allowing water to move unrestricted now under other people's property.
Right.
I think that would make sense with culvert that was added in there. Is it changing the water flow?
Okay. Well, I can have him check it again, but like I said, he was aware of it previously, but I will ask him about it.
It might be with the driveway elevated that high that's now funneling into low spots, and you're, instead of, absorbing into the soil at that location, it's now running off into
Okay.
a concentrated stream. And especially then if there's not turf established on that, you're gonna get whatever soil's left there washing into the pond.
Right.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Rainville.
I'd be interested if Ms. Foyer, the Dupniquets, would be able to talk to Mr. Spike on 203rd to see if we can find out what it was that he received.
No, I just brought it up, sorry, I
Okay.
thought it was on the screen, but it's not. In 2014, Mr. Spike received a letter regarding chickens. The chickens were running loose. And that's all he's gotten in writing from the
They're
city.
still running loose, so that's okay. I was in this property today, they're everywhere.
They're good tick eaters.
They're everywhere.
Very good ticket.
They're on the garage, on the house, they're everywhere.
So I don't know who would have sent another letter, but it wasn't me.
Well,
Well,
if we could
if we
ask
can-
the complainants, if we could get a copy of that, then we're looking at what it was,
Okay.
what steps the city previously took.
You got it?
We can mirror that.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bryan.
question for Planner Stockman or anyone else. So when they moved the house in 2016 and then they said they had to seed, was there a time frame, a deadline for that to get done?
Well, at the time, see, he didn't even he didn't disrupt really anything, he just put this driveway in over the muck. I mean, and honestly, yeah, I mean, this one has not even remotely gone like a typical development because, you know, I guess because it's a total do-it-yourself or, I don't know why, but yeah, it's been troublesome, I would admit that. But, you know, there wasn't this much area that was disturbed until recently, so. Because he plopped the house in there, you know, he plopped the existing home and then moved it in, so. But,
One
yeah.
more thing, then we gotta move on here.
Did he pull a permit to pull the house in?
Yeah.
It's in his file? There's not one in his file right now.
Yeah, there is.
Not to move the house in, for the house to be there, but not to move the house. Because we haven't woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning with no permits pulled.
Pardon me?
Connexus wasn't there when you moved the house in. Nobody was in the house. We moved the house in at 3 o'clock in the morning, woke you up, me up, with all the construction crews. They just showed up one night.
You actually have to move a house that late at night, so to.
Yeah, but you have to have Connexus to pick up the power lines you're running underneath.
Right.
He didn't. You have to have planning to make sure it's, he didn't, and was never cited for any of it.
That permit would not be through the city, it'd be through the county, coming down the county roads.
But wouldn't you have to prep the house to be in there and have it approved to do the house on site?
The
Yeah,
house,
the building official
Yeah.
reviewed the plan of where the house was gonna go, and the building official went to look at the house before he moved it in. Yeah.
But don't you have to say when you're moving it, it just doesn't just show up, like, Merry Christmas, there's a house here now.
Well,
You gotta
they-
make sure everything's set and ready to go. You say you didn't move much land? If that driveway you saw today, Paul, did that carry a house down it? No way. He dug up tons of that land to put that house in there. It regraded the entire property. All of it got regraded. Per the site plan you have. Am I lying? The entire thing.
Can I make one comment? There's definitely been a change in water flow. When we moved into our house in 2010, since then, we have never had a musky basement until this year. Our basement's just, it's musty. I've had to put a dehumidifier in. I change the bucket every day. You can't tell me that water flow did not change. We can't mow our lawn in the back because it's so wet.
Sounds like we're not done with this for a little while, but let's start with what we can do. Take a look at the water flow, take a look at the established of the turf over bare land. Take a look at how much material was moved within the limitations, and take care of the noxious weeds.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. What else you got on the question on the Twin Lakes Beach?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we've had a couple complaints in the last month. One was regarding dogs on the beach. Despite the sign, people are kind of ignoring it, and, you know, not all kids like dogs or might be fearful, so that was one thing. And then, the other thing was, sorry, I have to find it. I had something from the county. Ooh, did you see that too? Do you remember what that was?
It was dealing with parking at the boat launch.
Oh, yeah.
Asking, and I was gonna post it on the Facebook page, and I forgot, now that I think of it. The county was asking if we could try and ask vehicles without trailers not to park at the boat launch, because there isn't enough room on busy days for vehicles with trailers to park there.
And I said some of the overflow and the rest of the parking lot is filled, they're going down into that, and they've had some fisticuffs.
Just to go, yeah.
Could we put a sign down there that says trailer parking only?
I don't believe the council's had that discussion, though.
It would be those of us like me with a truck who brings my kayaks down there. That's where you have to launch the kayaks, it's hard to get them there from the other parking lot. But what the county had suggested, it was restricting at least some of the areas for trailers, so your stalls are 2 stalls long, and car parking can only be down at the end, or, like I said, the person who comes and checks the boats coming out of the water is very concerned over tempers. So that would be one issue. The other one is the dogs on the beach. Apparently there's a small sign right at the beach. Recommendation from our park committee was to have a bigger sign, maybe a sign closer to the parking lot, so your dogs aren't already down at the beach when they see the sign. Apparently what's going on is the various city Facebook pages and surrounding communities, all the way up to Zimmerman and Oak Grove, Ramsey, Elk River. They're all saying, you want a great place to get your dog cool, take them up to Twin Lakes Beach. So it's being promoted as a place to run your dogs in the water. My concern is every time I see a news article about swimmer's itch or closed beaches, we have 2 issues. One is horse people like to cool their horses off in the lake, and I've been there when they do that, the horses tend to relieve themselves when they get in that nice cool water. I've seen people riding their horses in the swimming area. So I do think that if we're going to keep that a clean lake, we have to do everything we can, and certainly the beach itself. There's 3 issues. One, the water quality, one, the beach quality, if they don't pick up after themselves. And then, as Ms. Stockman mentioned, some kids are afraid of dogs. And it needs to be it's a very small beach, and I just saw one of the local churches here is having their church picnic down at Twin Lakes Park this weekend, and they're gonna have baptisms down there. You want to keep clean water. But regardless of that, it is one of the nicer beaches around, Lake Orono and Lake George. Lake George with the itch and Lake Orono with the contamination. People prefer to come to ours. We need to keep it as pristine as we can. I forget, it was $1.5 million that Elk River's going to put into cleaning up the Lake Orono beach and water area. Putting in quite a bit of money into it. So the question is, and one of the suggestions was a larger sign, a sign out towards the parking lot, no dogs on the beach. They would like to see something in our city newsletter, and they're going to take it upon themselves to counter all the invites on other city Facebook pages to say that any city that's saying take your dog swimming at Twin Lakes will be countered with a dogs not allowed on the beach response.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Ricker.
instead of having limited the sign to no dogs, should we not say no animals? And that way people aren't running their horses down there either.
It's okay by me. Maybe we have a picture of a horse and a dog. In case they don't know what we're talking about.
If they bring their cat.
I was gonna say cats,
Cats in water, I don't think you have too much of them. Bunny rabbits.
pigs, could
Pet
bring-
squirrel, skinning
your
squirrel.
goats.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bryan.
we do have, talk to Joe, but there is $300. I don't know if that would be enough. There's $300 budgeted for park signs. I don't know if that would cover that or not, but are we basically looking at getting some sort of quotes put together to get signs? And then move it around?
Certainly see what it would take to, I don't know if that's a standard sign or not, but probably not a lot of places have no animals in the water, but on the beach.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rainville.
and are we regulating no animals in the water just at the beach or also at the boat launch?
And
What
say
are
probably
we-
a lot of the horses going to the boat launch.
How, I mean, what's the council's thought on that?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bettinger.
I think all we can do is regulate the beach. We don't, there's a lot of private properties around that property. We can't tell them they can allow their dogs or whatnot to go into the lake.
Well,
We'd have to pass some type of ordinance to do that, and I don't,
Well, I don't disagree on the private property, they're gonna do what they wanna
Like
do.
in city property.
But I think in the city property, the question is, the boat launch being right next to the beach, is it reasonable to say no animals on the beach, no animals in the water at the boat launch? So it is pretty nasty when the horses let loose.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Ricker.
with all the farmland around that lake though, you're not gonna control what goes in that lake. And if there's somebody who, spreads their manure on a field, it's getting in the lake. So I can see, keeping the dogs, and part of the thing was you're making a comment about kids being afraid of the dogs. Yeah, keep them away from the beach, keep the horses away from the beach, but you're not gonna control what goes in that water.
No, just minimize it, but
But, and again, you put one farmer who spreads his manure out on his field, you're getting how much 100-fold of what.
that all goes into West Twin.
Yeah.
if I had a horse, I would never take it down a boat landing.
Yeah.
Dummy road, a lot of times it's broken glass. I don't think there's too many people will take their horse down a boat landing. There's times I hate to back my boats in.
Yeah, first time I saw it, I was like, what the heck are you doing?
Yeah.
I have had quite a few phone calls about asking how, if there's swimmers at the swim lanes. If we've had any.
To our knowledge, there has not been. I've not had any reports of it. I've personally been in there other than the kayak, but I do get in and out of the water kayaking and have not had any problems.
So, Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Rainville.
Based on Councilmember Bryan's comment that there's $300 in the funds, in the park funds for signs, are we looking for an RCA to direct staff to get quotes for a larger sign at the beach and signs in the parking areas that no animals are allowed in the beach area?
I think the recommendation from somebody on the park committee was a bigger sign, to find the best placement of the sign, put an article in the newsletter, and then they were going to take upon themselves to counter the Facebook invites. So I think that if you're going to put together something to request staff do that, probably would be the newsletter, price out signs, and then determine location.
Okay.
And they can do that in conjunction with the park committee. If you want to put that together for Wednesday. And everybody all right with that coming in? We've talked about it now, have an RCA as soon as possible to be included in a meeting Wednesday. All right? Ms. Stockman, anything else you want to highlight on the rest of the code enforcement?
No, not unless you have any questions. Isn't that your old had quite a few calls on it.
I'd like to get in to see it. I looked at the pictures online, it looks way different
Oh,
than last time I was in there.
I know he was doing a lot of work after the renters left too.
Yeah, it looks pretty nice.
Anything else from council standpoint? All right, we have an RCA for quotes for road improvement projects.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Bryan.
Joe provided some quotes. I offered, talked to Ellen and offered to put the RCA together. There was three quotes. It took a little while to get them in and it needed some clarification, so I apologize for the delayed RCA. So there's some ditch work and culvert replacement on Basalt and Pinnaker Lake, as well as the culverts that are pushing up on Iguana. There's also another quote to actually replace the blacktop on Watercrest Street and Bison Street where the pavement failed. The snowplows were having issues, and when the plow went through on Watercrest and couldn't get around on Bison. As I understand it, maybe I'm wrong, the putting the 2.5 inches of wear coat on Watercrest and 4 inches of wear coat on Bison Street should be enough, so that in theory those areas wouldn't have to be overlaid in the future. And I understand that, so Joe suggested that the Paris companies clean up the ditch on Basalt as well as the culverts on 207th and Basalt, and then having D&T and Son look at the culverts and work on the culverts on Iguana. That would have to be, the blacktop there would have to be replaced after a while. Joe was thinking he would appreciate some time for those to settle down. And then there was the one quote from North Valley to do the work on Bison and Watercrest. Bob mentioned briefly before we left that we probably should look at getting another quote just to make sure our I's are dotted and T's were crossed.
I think this is way too much for one RCA, first of all. I don't know what ditch work means. The culverts pushing up in Iguana, we've already had a conversation as to, until you relieve the water backing up, that's just gonna be a patch. And now we've got a $3,500 to dig it up, and then we got a original quote of $2,700 just to patch over mill the butt joints and pave over the culvert crossing, an 1.5 inches of material. That was gonna cost us $2,700 in addition to $3,500 to dig them out. And yet, it's a patch job. We're dealing with a symptom, not a root cause. We did this down in Autumn Acres, and it's already coming back up because we didn't deal with the water drainage. And so when we hear up on culvert replacement of Basalt and Pinnaker, because we're gonna do some ditch work. I don't know what ditch work is. Clean the drain to the drainage ditch for $1,650. And clean the ditch in Basalt as well as replace 2 culverts. So we're getting 2 culverts replaced and all the ditches cleaned out to the drainage ditch for $1,650, and we're getting 2 culverts pulled out for $3,500. To me, it begs running this by Bob and saying, can you put this together in separate projects? The question I had, because then we get right from doing ditch work, pulling out culverts, replacing some culverts. It's going to be different replacing the other culverts. We haven't dealt with the water yet. And then we have 2 completely separate things. Watercrest, which the planning or the Road and Bridge was talking about turning back to gravel. Now we're going to repave the whole thing, 24 feet wide at 2.5 inches. Is there any remediation? I mean, if it's so bad it's going back to gravel, is an overlay of 2.5 inches really sufficient at this point? Or does that have to be taken down to, he's gonna remove the bituminous, put in 2 inches of class 5, and then a wear coat of 2.5 inches. And on Bison Street, we're only going 12 feet wide on the cul-de-sac. And there we're going 4 inches. I'm gonna excavate something out for $2,800. So is this remediation dealing with the root cause of that? When I was down there Tuesday night, all the neighbors swore they didn't actually burn their pile in there. They tried, but it was too wet, so they dragged it off into the field and burned it there. So they're claiming they didn't actually ruin it, so is there something else underneath that that caused the plow issue? So to me, putting $7,200 on those two and an unknown amount on Iguana without knowing we've actually fixed anything seems premature. I know these people over here want their bump taken care of. Frustration they have is we spent original bid of $2,700 to smooth out the bumps on the road. We went out and spent $1,500 on signs and didn't do anything with the road. They just said, could have taken $1,500 on signs and put another $1,200 in there and temporarily fix the road. So I think we need to get the drainage figured out. There's a private ditch running west through the Mueller's property. There's a county ditch running west and south through the Mahutka property. And short of dealing with the Mueller portion in the middle, I think we're just patching this. We have another problem again next year.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bettinger.
part of why them automakers and this culvert's pushed up, there's not enough cover on them. It's not because there's water backed up. You should have at least 2.5 feet of cover on pipes, otherwise the frost gets down and pushes them up.
Well, we just fixed automakers. Why didn't we do that then? So we fixed that last
The
year.
ditch isn't deep enough to get enough cover. I mean, they couldn't get it. That's what Joel's trying to do by replacing these culverts. He's taking the concrete out there, putting a smaller diameter pipe in there to get it lower, to get more cover on there, and hopefully that'll stop the freezing and pushing up. I don't think he's gonna gain it. I think he says there's only about 6 inches of cover over that pipe right now. I don't think he's gonna get us 2 feet, but.
Well, the water's coming further and further back. If you looked over at Lakeside Cabinets, they now have cattails in their front ditch. North Valley said they can't mow their ditch anymore, it's too wet. And my concern is what's in front of Lakeside is gonna come under 199th into the city property in the corner. We're gonna have our own wetland. So there still needs to be some drainage figured out there as part of this. Because a 12-inch culvert will certainly allow them to go down a little deeper, but if we still got all that standing water, it's gonna fill that 12-inch culvert. If it just goes deeper and there's still too much water.
You could saw cut the bituminous and remove the bituminous and smooth it out with gravel for now until you.
I think that's reasonable because at least it would give a temporary fix to the businesses that are having the most trouble with those heaves in the road. If we could smooth that out while we're doing a long-term fix here, saw cut it, get it down to as smooth as possible with gravel. And then see, I would like an opportunity to go see if Mueller's would let us on their property to clean out that ditch. Guess that's been a problem in the past. So Shane's request was if anybody knew them and could go talk to them, I could engage that part. If we want to do a patch job on this, just saw cut it and get it to gravel for now. And I don't know what's going on in Basalt and Pinnaker. What ditch work exactly is being. Because that's a heck of a price if you're doing cleaning ditches, replacing 2 culverts. It doesn't say if, looks like we're paying for the culverts. It doesn't say if who's paying for or doing the blacktop over those. I guess that's on basalt where it's still gravel. Or it's 207th in basalt. So is that blacktop or gravel there?
I'm not sure off the top of my head.
What I would like to do is run this back through Bob, it's supposed to be in next week, and see if we can separate these into real projects and start with Iguana, saw cutting that, putting gravel on there for now. Pinnaker Lake is gonna be gravel, right? And then Bob wanted to get an additional cost for Bison and Watercress.
Yeah, he was saying just, we should.
You guys okay with that, just reducing this to a patch job on Iguana for right now and let Bob readdress this, rest of it on here?
You fine with that?
Yeah, that's okay with me.
Okay.
Watercress, would you wanna look at turning that back to gravel?
Well, you know,
And then do, an overlay next year and assess it? Make it into a project?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Bryan.
It was originally talked about during the road and bridge that we would just put it back to gravel for now, so we wouldn't have to worry about it. And that was one of the quotes that was, originally that was gonna be the quote that was requested, and potentially to get it in if we did Old Viking and needed to, if we were reclaiming parts anyway, to just go ahead and do Watercress. So the quote actually came back with putting 2.5 inches down, and then I guess I'm kinda going, ideally, you know, it'd be nice to put it back to the way it was, so it would be blacktop, but that's how I don't know exactly, I can't speak for Joe, what he asked North Valley to do, but that was how the quote came back. So is it something where residents would get upset that the road's back to gravel for a while? I don't know how that actual process would work, and I'm not exactly sure how many houses are in there, if you wanted to make that a project just to repave it for next year, how all that would work out, or would, if you did that part now, could you skip it and include them in when, that entire road was overlaid all the way from Cleary over to Nowlan? Could you include them in that, since they need that for access? I don't know, you might not get all of the
The
cost.
concern was that for some reason it was at the road and bridge, they said it was bad enough that they would just turn it back to gravel at this point. Grind up the bituminous, put it down for a base that would then prepare it for future remediation. And I just was wondering if it was so far gone, they said, let's just grind it up. How we think putting a wear course on top of that now. So again, without the information you're saying, it was so bad we're gonna grind it up, but it's not too bad, we can still overlay it, doesn't make sense.
And
It's
I'm-
that far gone, I don't think a 2.5 inch wear course is gonna do anything.
Well, we're removing it. We're removing the bituminous and putting more class 5 down, so I'm assuming that's taking it all up
Putting the same stuff down.
and putting 2.5 inches back down.
Well, I think we should take a look, and one option is to grind it up now, let it settle, and make a project out of it next year. Or just take it out of the funds now and.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bettinger.
in my opinion, it should be reclaimed. Just, it needs a reclaim overlay, and ideally, if we were in the spring right now, we could make it into a project. right now, but we don't have enough time to get it done this year. But as a project, it'd be reclaimed and overlay. Well, let's reclaim it this year. They can regrade it next spring and do an overlay on it. And we assess it back. And that way the whole thing gets done from, 187th all the way down to the old cul-de-sac. And it's like a new road, the whole thing.
Right, that's kind of what I was getting at, so we wouldn't have to, make it a new, do what we need to do to have it be a new road, so we wouldn't have to come back and put another overlay on it when we get to the rest of 187th and Clifton and the rest of the stretch, so. I think that's where, we can, I have no problem with that either.
Anything else on that? So for right now, we'll take a look at temporary fix on Iguana. All right. Consent agenda.
This is Park and Rec.
Oh, I'm sorry, Park and Rec.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Rainbow.
I would request that this be moved to council items, or to the consent agenda if we have, if we're come to conclusion tonight. This event itself is not in any of the parks, so it really is not related to Park and Rec.
Just got a couple of questions on it, and then I agree we can move it to consent agenda. Second paragraph says, participants will be bused from A&B Walding parking lot to the beginning of the race on Tiger. Safety plan down at the last paragraph says, participants will be bused from A&B Walding to the beginning of the race on Engen. So begin on Tiger or Engen?
I have not participated in this race. I believe it's the corner of Tiger and Engen is where the
No.
race starts.
They go north on Engen, but Engen's over to the
Right.
Does it,
No, okay.
They'd start on
apologies.
Engen. They'd have to be bused back. Are they being bused back from Tiger?
Yes,
Yeah.
once the race is over, you get bused back.
okay, so that's just to the end of the race, so that second paragraph should be the end of the race on Tiger. And the only other question I had was, third bullet point in the last paragraph, it asks for use of one firefighter from approximately 9 to 10:30, not to exceed a $50 cost. Source of funding for firefighter general fund, not to exceed $50. And then the last sentence says, we would like to ask this at no charge to the Lions Club. So is it $50 or is it no charge, or is it $50 max, but we're not gonna charge them?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Rainbow.
Again, I did not prepare this, but it's my understanding that if the council would not waive the fee for the firefighter up to $50, then the Lions would pay for that, although they are asking that that fee be waived. Which is under the requested council action, the last bullet point, last sentence. We would like to ask for this at no charge to the Lions Club.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bettinger.
I don't know if anybody knows, can answer this or not. So the race, where it ends at Tiger and County Road 65, or it ends with the gravel stops?
Gravel. It ends where 205th goes west.
Okay. Cause that's not what they're showing in their map, cause if they go on the county road, they'll need a permit, and so you don't wanna go on the county road.
Yeah,
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rainville.
and to Councilmember Bettinger, correct, and I think that's why that's always been the thought, is that's why it would end before the county road.
And yeah, in years past, it's always ended right at the T there, right on the end of the gravel.
Good.
And then Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Rainville?
I have a question. This is, I think, the second or third time the Lions have requested this. And I'm wondering if this same documentation provided by the Lions were requested of Lakeside Cabinets for also using the city streets. And just, if we're going to request this of the Lions, then policy going forward should be that we request it of anybody closing a city street. Or asking that there be modifications to the use of that street.
Can you clarify as far as what document you're looking for?
The certificate of liability insurance, which was required of the Lions last year, the indemnity agreement for the 5K walk run. The map we did get provided, they did provide and then the waiver of liability.
So the indemnification certainly is an important one. Waiver of liability is really the organization's concern. But certainly indemnifying the city for allowing use of the streets so that if something does happen there, we don't get sued as well.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Rainville.
In the participant waiver of liability, it does also include the city of Nowthen.
Okay,
But
so
they're not-
indemnifies the city of Nowden
Yep.
if they trip and fall. Well, I think you get two separate things here. One is this, and with just the correction of the beginning and end of the race. Two questions. Is the council willing to pay the firefighter not to exceed $50 and absorb that cost?
I would be in favor of that.
Councilmember Brian Rickert?
So basically would be having an EMT on hand just in case?
Yes.
That's fine with me.
Guess I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't care either way, but I'm not sure if they do it just if they typically would do it in pairs or singles. I guess
What's the pay these days?
14 something, I think.
So we got an hour and a half, so we could afford two of them if that's what they want, not to exceed 50.
Yeah, that's what I would just change it to,
Okay.
possibility of up to 2. Just,
So if Mayor, if you could contact whoever wrote this and have them correct
well, you could
that.
still, it's still not gonna exceed, 2 hours would still not exceed $50.
Two people it would, by $6.
Well, 1450 times, what, yeah.
If that's what you're
I think
proposing.
the ones are each what for it. Well, I don't know,
Yeah,
I know typical CPR now, you're not performing on one
One
person,
person.
so.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I would contact the Lions, but I guess what I would do, with the thought of having two, that we, just not to exceed $75, and that should cover it, I would think, at $14 an hour.
56 would.
56 would be, well, not to exceed 75, so.
All right, are we okay with that? With those changes and putting it consent agenda?
Yep.
And then, and Mayor, if you would like to bring up the other, I would suggest that you run it by Bob.
Okay,
And, with this in mind, yes, if we're using streets, we should be indemnified by both the user and the participants. Consent items, we got a few minutes. So the treasurer's report. We have a little bit to sign off on yet. We gotta find $51,000 somewhere. So, that'll be Bob's first job on Monday.
He doesn't know CPS. He doesn't know about CPS.
Well, he's gonna learn quick, isn't he? So, yes, we're gonna keep looking for that.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rainville.
by chance, does Mr. Poofall know that system, having,
I was on the phone with him for about 5 hours yesterday.
oh, all right.
So I would actually like to request a midterm audit, just to find out what the deal is. Because I don't know what I did wrong, or
Is,
was misplaced in the wrong place.
Well, let's start with when Bob comes in and say, here's what we got, what do you recommend? Because,
okay,
yes, we need to make sure this balances properly. And just, let's put his feet to the fire right away and say, help us figure this out. And if a mid-year audit, might be a good idea with transition going on, that we make sure you understand, because it does sound like Bob's gonna count on you to do a lot of this, so I wanna make sure you're up to speed on it. But, yeah, let's start with that. I'm assuming he'll be here Monday morning, so,
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Rainville.
And just looking at that dollar amount, what comes to my mind is, does it have anything to do with the sale of the last lot? It's just such a close dollar amount to what our profit was on the last lot, or what, it just,
So our variation is 51,000 over.
yeah. And the-
Remember when Mike was playing with those numbers, he was gonna put it in a different location? Did he do that, maybe?
I don't know, I'll have to ask him.
Yeah, I just think it's such a close number that it would be,
He was gonna take it out of Burnstown Center and put it
Yeah.
into a receipt area, and maybe he did half of it, not the other half.
okay.
Makes sense.
Yeah,
I
I
would,
just, again, the number is just so close that,
And I don't know how, I mean, I went line by line through the bank statements and everything to try to find it, but
yeah, I won't be surprised if that's it, because I know he was just gonna move things, so. Let's start with that.
sale of
Yep.
the last lot.
So did he transfer the excess into another account and not delete it from the Burnstown Center here on the treasurer's report? I do have a question on the claims. Maybe it's jumped out at me, I didn't see it, but we have an invoice here from Corey and Rupee. Total now due and owing $3,900.
That was 2 months, this is we missed the first. and then that
Okay,
was it.
is there another, this is only the 1 month, though.
I know.
Yeah.
No. I didn't bring them with me, but there's actually 2 months of claims, or 2 months of,
Okay, so the balance due includes July and June. Okay. So we should have that here too, so we can see what we're looking at. Otherwise, it just didn't make sense, $3,900 and it's showing up on the claims as a $8,200.
And I saw the note about signing checks, and I guess I'll bring it to the council meeting, I didn't bring it back.
Okay,
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rickert.
question in regards to that, and just a question, because you go through that bill and you see a lot of telephone conferences with Jeff Pilon regarding transition issues, telephone call with Jeff Pilon regarding election judges and didn't we agree as a council that when, obviously you had permission to contact the attorney, but when that happened, that we got a summary of that conversation, so we were all apprised of what that conversation was?
Actually, those were him calling me
Well, again, it's still a conversation between you and the attorney. And it was my understanding when those conversations happened that we would, the rest of the council would be given a summary of those conversations. So I see an awful lot of them that say conversation with Jeff Pilon regarding transition. What transition? What-
Well, it was Corey's transition.
Well,
The
again-
contract that,
Okay, well, again, the agreement from the council was that we would be provided with a summary of those conversations. And I just want to make sure that we follow what we agreed upon. Not asking for any more than that.
all right. Anything else on the claims? All right, resolution approving GovPay. Again, I would like to table that, giving Bob a chance to.
He's the one who wrote this resolution.
So we're ready to go with that?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, we, when Ellen, Bob and I had, I don't know, it was quite a lengthy conversation about it, that there's been many residents or anyone coming in to pay their fees to the city who haven't had cash or check, and that, you know, wanted to pay with their debit card or credit card. This is just one, it came up at the clerk's conference, and this is a company that would provide the service to us at no charge to the city, and they would charge no more than 2.5% on credit card transactions, and it was 1.95% on debit cards. So then we would have terminals available for use at the city offices.
That include online?
It could, if we wanted to, it could be extended to being done online. We would just have to come up with making sure that it's easy for staff and Ellen to track what goes with one as things come in. Right now, we would be issuing a receipt, so that could still happen, that there would be that paper trail, at least for the time being, that, but I'm assuming there could be a process to come into play to allow online transactions.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Rainville.
On the ones that I've done with cities or municipalities, when I've done them online, you get you give them your email and you get an email response back, which is your receipt. And so that would cover online transactions. I do have a question on, two questions. One is, to start out, we could have a terminal at the office connected to the network. Are there any charges from RB Computers to make that connection, or any reoccurring fees for that through RB?
Ellen was a little busy, tell me if I'm wrong, we haven't specifically called them yet, but I think we can get away with just splitting off from Ellen's desk and running a network cable over to the front.
Front desk, all right. And then I would assume part of this then also would be making any changes to our forms, advising people when they pick up a form that you can pay this via credit card, and these are the fees that you'll be charged for doing so.
Wouldn't have to.
Put a sign on the counter.
I just know when I've done online, it's always told you what the,
The forms are
Yeah.
something that the building department has made, and they're the ones that have encouraged this all along. They've
But-
been trying to do this, so
Yeah.
they would probably be willing to do that.
okay. And I think it's a great idea. I just know one time I checked the wrong box when I paid my property taxes, between having it taken from a checking account and on a credit card, and it was a lot, because I didn't see that. And so I just think the residents, or anyone that's gonna be doing this, it needs to be apparent to them that
There is a fee.
that there is a fee, and, I mean, it's $1 if you, or $1.25 if you do your property taxes online from a checking account, but if you do it from a credit card, it's a lot more,
Right.
so,
Yeah, this is 2.5%.
yeah. And if you're doing a building permit, or something large, something less than $5,000, so.
We would certainly have to make whoever's using their cards at the office aware that there is a surcharge to cover the fees, yes.
And if we do it online, then that has to be apparent
It could be,
online also.
it could be incorporated into
Yeah.
the wording on the website, sure.
Is there, Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Rainville.
To Ellen and Councilmember Bryan, is there any ability with this for us to do any of our bills online, pay our bills online through this process?
Not that
No?
I'm aware of, I know that,
Okay.
what are you talking about, the city paying bills through this?
Yes,
No.
yeah, or
That would have to be
receiving?
through our bank.
Okay, all right, okay.
The one day that Bob was here was the day that we were in the office discussing this, and there were a handful of people that were in there just that day looking for credit card payments.
Yeah.
One of them was an older gentleman with his daughter who had a trailer load of recycled stuff. And by the time she ran to the bank and the bank computers were down and this, I mean, it was a half an hour and he was sitting in the truck chomping at the bit because they had to go get cash because they didn't have anything to pay with besides plastic. So it would be a great service to the residents.
Yeah, it's pretty common, so. All right. Keep that on consent agenda. Bettinger to, Councilmember Bettinger to represent us at the watershed meeting.
I don't know if everybody had a chance to get through that or not. As you can see, Bowser's really pushing for the Upper Rum River to be doing more. And
Yeah,
As
I
you
was
can
gonna go back and add up all these estimated numbers. There's some huge numbers in there.
Yeah, and that's, you know, that, the budgets for the next 10 years, you can see it, it pretty much doubles what we're paying today. If you take out the watershed plan that we're updating, I think our budget's for about 20 grand a year for the whole thing, and now it's gonna be close to 40 and climbing. And that's not even counting the, there's other things that, the stuff under the MC, that's stuff that municipal cities will have to do, like there's a culvert inventory and there's things that cities will have to do. Once the watershed plan's done, we'll have to update our ordinances and different things, so.
I was looking at, you know, it's quite a swing, $50,000 to $500,000. Quite an estimate. You know.
Covering their bases.
Some of them project estimates, there's gonna be, there's water-based funding through Bowser, and there's grant monies out there that will bring in about 80% of the cost of them projects, so there's some big money out there. But there's funds you have to match with.
When you're looking at the budget, the planning cycle, you know, annual reporting, 2018 is $20,000. It's going up 500 plus each year. And that's municipalities' cost. And then in 2019, municipalities are paying for watershed culvert inventory and municipal ordinance reviews. That's another $70,000 in 2019. And that's per municipality, right?
No, that's
This is our
for all
bill.
the cities if you added them together, and that's just an estimate.
So these dollars are not our dollars, these are everyone's dollars?
Yes.
The total.
Yes.
So and will our dollars then be prorated as they are currently based on
Yes.
our water?
The stuff that's under the Upper River WMO, that stuff is split according to the joint powers agreement.
All right.
The
okay.
stuff under the MC,
Let's see.
that's all paid by the cities, but it's all the cities together. So it's whatever our engineer will have to update our ordinances and stuff like that. It's whatever that cost is.
Cost is,
Yeah.
okay. So we're not paying it to them,
No,
we're paying it to our,
To our staff.
whether it be internal or external staff.
yep,
Okay.
And they're just guesstimating that there'll be $20,000 worth of inventory, watershed culvert inventory, $30,000 from municipal ordinance review.
and that culvert inventory, that's a 2-year process, so there's $40,000.
Oh, yeah.
That would be, that hasn't been defined exactly what information they're gonna require, but it's probably gonna be location and elevation of all the culverts in the city.
What does the last item stand for, RAPS?
Oh, I forget.
Water something, or wetland something,
It's your Rum River,
3,500 only.
yeah.
Remember that saying at the meeting I was at, that, again, they use the acronyms to list the RAPS was. A lot of this is Rum River, which is, that's the annex part of the road, we probably have nothing to do with it.
See on the first page, there's projects being budgeted for, and that's your Lake George Water Quality Project, Rum River Bank Stabilization Project, land conservation cost unknown. And them funds are gonna be for, them projects are actually gonna cost a lot more than that. That's our share that we're putting aside. The first stuff that was sent, that's in red and stuff, that was a list of projects that were identified by either Bowser, Anoka Conservation District. So if there's any of them that you'd wanna see added to our budget, or added as a project, you're supposed to let us know, and then we'll get it in there. Or if you have something, a different project that's not even listed here, we could get in there. We can do an amendment later to add some, if something comes up a couple years from now, we can do an amendment to add it in there. But to qualify for them grants, it has to be in our plan. So if you know of any projects you want done, you need to let us know so we get them in the plan.
So we're not, to Councilmember Bettinger, so we're not obligated, this is their plan, but we're not obligated. So we have, page 3 of 7, middle of the page, we've got Pickerel and East Twin. We're not obligated to do those, correct?
No, we're not. Them are, it's just a list of projects that different agencies have recommended.
Because again, there's another one, estimate $50,000 to $200,000, well, what?
Mr. Bettinger, is there, remember when the park committee wanted to add access to that creek? Was it part of Trot Brook on the north end, sort of off of Xenon? That Dan Williams had talked about for like canoe and other small boat access. And is there anything, a way to incorporate that? I mean, like land acquisition or anything?
It would have to be like something that would improve water quality.
Oh,
Yeah, this is only water quality, not
Yeah.
access.
Yep.
so when they say they want to do property acquisition, what kind of example do they mean? Like, how would that improve water quality?
It'd be like a conservation easement around the lake so people could
Oh,
improve the beaches or the lake shore, which would,
cut right up to it.
degrade the water quality.
In the projects, bottom of page 1, and Lake George Water Quality Project, 15,000. Remember Bank Stabilization Project, 20,000. And Land Conservation Cost Unknown, 20,000. Rum River has allotments each year, the other two don't. Is that a one-time payout on the other two, or?
Because that would be projects that we would apply for grants, so
Unless they
the
were-
money that the WMO is putting aside would be your matching funds. We gradually build up money to go toward them grants.
But we only have it on the Rum River Stabilization, we don't have any matching.
It actually covers all 3 projects. I asked that same question when it was presented to us. Why is it just on there?
Where is it in the middle?
It's for all, that
These are all.
That five, like the first year, the 5,500, that's to build up that fund for all 3 projects.
So at the end, you'd have $6,800 for $55,000 worth of work. Not very much.
I wanted it set up differently, but lost. These projects here, I tried to tell them, Lake George, water quality, Rum River, bank stabilization. They're not in our city. And our water doesn't even run to Rum River until it gets in, south of our city. We shouldn't have to pay for any of that. So it should be, if that's in the city of Oak Grove and it only benefits Oak Grove, in my opinion, they should be the only ones. You know, the matching money that's needed for them grants, they should be coming up with that. Or the benefiting property owners.
So is there still any opportunity to fight that?
I lost that argument at the WMO board, so.
Is there a public hearing or is it too late for that?
I would guess there'd be another public hearing. We're trying to finish it up and it's gotta go back out for review.
Yeah, you would think if it's not benefiting universally, it shouldn't be applied universally.
That's what I try to tell them, it's, most of the water runs to the Ford Brook on that east side, which runs south, and it runs into Trout Brook, and then it runs over to the Rum River, south of the upper Rum.
All right, so I guess the question is, we need to identify that Randy will be our representative.
I think that's what Bob came up with. I'm already the representative there, so.
That's like, that was duplication.
What about me on this?
I didn't know how to word it, what I was supposed to do.
I think if you have any, it's, the watershed, what we're looking for is if you have any comments or you want anything, is there anything you want added or changes made? That, we want feedback from you guys on this, or is it fine the way it is, the proposed budgets?
Well, the one comment I had here on page 2, the June 26th meeting, our office was directed to meet individually with member communities. The purpose of the meeting was to present the current status of the plan, review the revised budget, and provide the opportunity for the community to include local project plans. The meeting should include your board representative, and I'm sure they can bring their questions and comments back to the board on September 4th. Did they ever meet with individual member communities?
I assumed Chuck was gonna be here tonight to do that, because there's supposed to be money in the budget to pay him to come out and do this presentation instead of me.
Can I ask how you want this worded, so I can change it for the next council packet? Yeah, 1.5.
I just Upper Rum is looking for any feedback on the Upper Rum updated watershed plan.
Can you say it slower? I can't understand what you said there.
We're just looking for feedback, comments and feedback on the Upper Rum
Provide
watershed plan.
feedback?
Yep.
So in all reality, it shouldn't really be in the consent agenda then.
Is there anything to, any action item out of this, other than providing feedback?
No.
Would the feedback be, we go with your,
Because the budgets for each year will still be presented annually, so you'll still be approving them.
Feedback
We did have a 2019 budget, and I told them I'm not gonna present it until we get done with our plan, because obviously it's way different. And the number that's in here now is probably gonna be a lot closer to what it really is gonna be for next year, so we need to take that into account when we do our budget.
Mr. Mayor? So what Bob, before he left, I didn't write down what he said, so I was trying to remember it. He said to have the council send Bettinger, but with the stipulation that he wouldn't spend more than the budget already allows, or something like that. I can't remember how he worded it, but it was something about budgetary impact
Mr.
in
Mayor?
this
Oh, I'm sorry.
consent item, and I didn't know how to say it.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Rainville.
In the email that we received from Mr. Darris, number 3 was Randy Bettinger asked staff to be authorized to provide input on behalf of the city on 10-year plan update of the Upper Rum River Watershed Management Organization. I think that makes sense, since it is my understanding he's the city's representative. Any comments should also include the stipulation that they spend their budget wisely and that the city prefers little or no future increases in an annual budget. And I believe that that's always been our thought process. That,
That's why you wanted it on the consent.
yeah. And I would just,
That could be your feedback right there.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that, to go back to,
They were
what you had
disappointed
said.
Chuck didn't come and
Yeah,
present like he was
Yes,
authorized to,
Yeah.
or
they were
directed.
paying them to, yeah,
maybe now that we'll get a discount.
yeah. that kind of- The only other,
Tell them we were outraged
the only other,
for having to pay for Oak Grove projects.
yeah, is that you just reaffirm what you had said earlier, that we shouldn't be paying for things that are not in our city.
I think that should be on the record.
Yeah,
When we started that organization, that's what it was all about. If you, you know, just, if you want it, you pay for it.
yeah.
I think that's fair.
That's why it's, we could have 2 members on that committee, so we could use one more.
Might need 2 come January.
All right, anything else on that? I noticed that Ellen didn't put times in here. She didn't.
Yeah, that was a Bob recommendation.
Gave us a goal, of course. We're already 3 hours, 2 hours and a half hours past his time, so. Mike Pofel, this has gone up, but do we know what the previous years have been?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember
I
Rainville.
just looked to last year's was 7250, so it went up 700.
I remember it being down in the 6s.
Maybe, I think that's what I looked at, what we had maybe that's just what we had budgeted. I looked at,
It's going up 10% a year? Are we
We'd have to
getting
look
tougher to
closer.
do, or?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rainville.
I know when Mr. Pufo made his presentation for the 2017 audit to us in April, he mentioned that every year he offers each city he does work for a project at no charge. And I would ask council to consider, and maybe I'll talk to Bob about this, but that we consider getting quarterly reports, such as we do from Rum River Consultants, which breaks everything down on one page, expenses and revenues, so that we know truly what we are expending on our outside consultants. I've always appreciated that in the building department, that we know what we're paying, whether it's a plus or a minus. And I don't know if that's something he could help develop using how our bills currently come in, how we pay our bills out to the different contractors. It'll take a while, but eventually we'll get a good sense of what we are truly paying. And I think that's a benefit to the council and to the residents, that they can look at that also.
I was saying that when it's on the prosecuting attorney, you know, I have no idea if there's any revenue coming in from that. Look, all the prosecutions he's doing, where's that money go?
Oh.
And it's never really known. So.
There is some automatically into the checkbook from that.
The prosecuting? Yeah, I think what Councilman Rainville is saying is, it'd be nice if we could collect that quarterly and put that out like the building department does. Here's how much revenue, here's how much, we received in and paid out.
I don't know if you're aware of this, but I'm the one who creates the building department reports. So,
Oh, I'll just do it for everybody then.
just saying, if we want a report from Mikey, it's gonna be me that's gonna be doing all those reports. So I'm the one that does the building department report, I'm the one that did, that's.
Mr.
It's
Mayor.
a lot of extra work.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Rainville.
I'm just looking to see if Mr. Pufal can help us design that report. if that's something he
Not
can
matter of
design,
It's finding the numbers
and then
and all that, but.
determining where we take those numbers from.
Well, it's something we can brainstorm on once we get Mr.
Okay.
Darris in place.
Okay.
Mr.
Get
Mayor,
him done with all his vacations.
just for the record, in 2014, the audit was $8,500. So it was up and then went down, at least in that budgeted line item, so.
You mean we budgeted 8,500?
No, we actually spent $8,500. We budgeted 65, so.
All right. Anything else? We go quick, we can just beat 3 hours.
If there's nothing new, I would move to adjourn.
Just,
If there is nothing new.
Mr. Mayor, just to clarify, is there any action item for the, I didn't think there was anything that had to be done for the pipeline?
No.
Okay.
The understanding was that the pipeline project is complete and the bond is no longer needed.
Okay.
So the legal paperwork is the same.
So that could come off the consent agenda too.
I put it on there because Attorney Ruby recommended it.
Okay, okay.
So I took it out.
You can leave it there. All right, anything else?
Motion to adjourn?
So that's being taken off then, or you're leaving it on there?
Leaving it on.
Leave it on.
Yeah, but it should be, you're releasing the bond, yeah.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
For real now?
Take your turn.
Now, every time I see Black Camaro, I'm going, oh,
Okay, now, Thursday, so we take down.
No. Yes.
I Googled it the other day. The model that I have, in that year, there's only 1,900 manufactured.
I thought I saw that somewhere.
There were 700 and some black ones, and only 300 and some of those were manual transmissions.